Hello, my name is Roger and I have been making hanging baskets for 35 years at a nursery called Choice Plants near Romsey in Hampshire. I'm about to retire, so I thought I'd take this opportunity to make this video to show you how to make a whole series of different types of hanging baskets so that you can do it yourself. We used to have a hanging basket replanting service where we would plant several thousand baskets a year for our customers, but of course as I'm retiring I can't do that any longer, so I'm going to show you how to do your own baskets yourself. And I'm going to go through the plant selection a little bit, about composts and how to compose the baskets. So here we go. So in front of me I have a selection of hanging baskets. Hopefully if I hold them up you'll see them. There's two categories really that I've got here. Two of the baskets are what I call solid baskets and have no side plantings to them. This one's a wicker basket and this one is a coir basket where you can't plant plants through the side. And these two baskets have plantings where you can put the plant through the side of the hanging basket, this being a wire one and this being a plastic one. I'm going to plant all four baskets during this little video to show you the different techniques and how to do them. So let me just start with the merits of the baskets. These baskets, the solid baskets, are by far the easiest to plant because all we got to do is plant the top of the hanging basket. Same for that one. These ones are more complicated because we have to plant the sides as well. So they take more plants, these take fewer plants. In time, they both end up to look pretty much the same. But you've got to wait a long time for the plants to grow over this basket and hide the basket. It could take a month to 6 weeks longer than a basket like this where we planted in the side, but eventually they both look pretty much the same. So the compost that we use is a proprietary compost we have made for us. Compost that you need to use is a multi-purpose compost with John Innes. The John Innes is a loam base, which is a type of soil based compost that adds better moisture retention to the compost than just a compost made up of organic matter. So the John Innes is quite important. So when you come to select your compost, choose a multi-purpose compost with John Innes. It doesn't really matter about the brand, but that's the type of compost you want to use. Here is a very simple wicker hanging basket. We can all plant one of these. The first thing you need to make sure though, if it has a plastic lining in it, is to make sure that there's a hole in the lining. Otherwise the plants will get waterlogged and they will die. Now, if I was putting a hole, which I will do, in this hanging basket, I wouldn't put it in the bottom, because if we put it in the bottom, we're losing the capacity to have a little bit of a reservoir in the hanging basket. So I'm going to put my hole somewhere about 2 inches up into the basket, so that we allow the bottom of the basket to act as a reservoir. And when it gets to the 2-inch bit, it's going to flood out. Nothing very easy about this. I'm just going to make a rip in the polythene, and if I can get hold of it, in the right place, which is what I've done. One big rip, it's in the right place. It's about 2 inches above the base of the plastic. In goes the compost. It's not possible to do this scratching around the floor. You do need to be on a bench somewhere, standing upright. It's not easy to do it sitting down as well. Try and make yourself comfortable like I have here, everything at the right height. The compost goes into the basket, and here is the first absolute no-no. Do not compress the compost down. And we're in Great Britain as I speak today, and there's a great British habit of being neaty-peaty, where having put the compost into the basket, we want to tap it down and make it look nice and neat. You mustn't do that. You destroy the structure of the compost. So let me explain why. In a good quality compost like this, there is a mixture of fine particles and bigger particles. Where the bigger particles abut and touch each other, you get big holes, big pores in the compost. Where the smaller particles abut each other, you get small pores. When you water the compost, the surface tension of the small pores means that the water is retained in the small pores, but the bigger pores, the water drains out. In a good quality compost like this, and a multi-purpose compost with John Innes in, it has the right amount of fines and coarser material to have the right amount of small pores and bigger pores, such that when you water the hanging basket, enough water is retained, but enough air comes back into the compost for the plants to breathe. The roots need to breathe. As soon as you take the compost and pat it down, you make the bigger pores into small pores. The compost will hold more water because you've made the pores smaller, but it's too much water and the plant roots can't breathe. So do not compact the compost. Let's start again then. So in goes the compost. Fill it to about an inch below the top. And what you saw me do was to shake the basket. So I want to shake it level. If I've got too much in, I can shake it out. There it goes. If I haven't got enough in, I can put a little bit more in. But that's about the right level. So there it is waiting. But you see how nice and fluffy it is? It's not been compacted. So then we come on to the plants. I just want to say a few words about your plant choice. I have here just a selection of plants for this basket, and I've whizzed around the nursery and just chosen some plants for myself. I want to say a few words just about the quality of plants. We prided ourselves, as you can imagine, on selling fantastic quality plants, but of course it's a nursery, and on a nursery you're going to get some places where it's not grown quite well enough, or it's grown too fast and we've not sold the plants. And here's one here. Now this is the type of plant you don't want to be buying. When you come to buy plants, you need to buy plants that are compact, solid, with a good basal branching, because it's this basal branching when it grows away that's going to allow you to get the coverage in the hanging basket. What you don't want is a straggly plant like this. If by chance you do end up buying plants like this, or you have them, you just must start them again by cutting away the long stems and making it a plant that's going to re-break from the centre again and take away what looks like quite pretty stems, but they're no good to this particular plant. The problem is often is that people buy by their eyes and not by what really is technically correct. So they'll buy a scruffy plant because it's got a flower on it, when they sometimes won't buy a better quality plant because there's no flower on it, it doesn't look so attractive, but go for the quality of the plant. The other really good tip, which I never see on the nursery, but I do encourage people to do when I'm giving talks, is to actually take the plant, squeeze it, take the roots out of the plant and smell the roots. That's what I'm going to do. If it smells fresh, earthy, wet and sort of what I would call lovely, it means the root system's in good order. If the root system's in good order, then you've got every potential for the plant to grow and be beautiful, because it's the root system that's going to provide the power for the plant to grow. If I smell it and it smells sulphurous and slightly rotty, it's no good. Put the plant pot back on, put it down and walk away from it, because it means that this plant's been waterlogged and the root system is not in such good condition, and the plant will take a long time to recover from that. So I seriously do mean it. Make sure you empty a few of the plant pots when you're buying them and smell. The roots generally want to be white, like they are here. If they go round and round the pot, it doesn't matter, providing you can see white bits or white tips on the roots. It doesn't matter, it looks a bit pot bound. That doesn't matter at all. But they just want to smell very good. So here we are. So here's my selection of plants that I have got for this little hanging basket here. Most of these plants are trailing plants, and that's what you need for hanging baskets. But principally there are two categories of plants that you can use. One is what I call a trailing plant, the other is what I call a bulky plant. The bulky plant, and in this instance we'll call the Bacopa here a bulky plant, it makes a bulk of the plant. It's not like a trailing lobelia, which is going to trail for a long way down. This one's just going to bulk up. Some trailing plants only flower on the new growth. In fact, most trailing plants only flower on new growth, but some are quite extreme on it. So if you take a fuchsia as an example, if I was to plant this basket with just fuchsias, as the fuchsias grow and the flowers are held on the new growth, the flowers are close to the hanging basket. But as time goes by and the fuchsia plant grows bigger, the flowers get further and further and further away from the hanging basket, and eventually you get a green mass of fuchsia with a ring of flowers at the bottom. For a really nice hanging basket, you don't want to be doing that, and that's why sometimes, or all times actually, it's important to add in some other plants that don't go quite so far, trail quite so far, but give you the depth of colour. When I plant my hanging baskets, I don't try and be regular, so I'm not trying to be symmetric about it. So if I plant one fuchsia there, I wouldn't plant a fuchsia there. If I plant one petunia there, I don't plant a petunia there. It's much more random than that. When I watch people buy plants on the nursery, they tend to buy them in 2s or in 4s, because if you put one there, gosh, I've got to have one here. If I've got one there and one there, I've got to have one here and one there. Try and break out of that sort of cycle of being in pairs and mirroring the hanging basket. In many ways, if you had 7 or 8 different plants and put them in this hanging basket at random, you'll have a much more interesting hanging basket, and it will not grow asymmetrical. It will grow symmetrical because each plant is trying to find its own space, and it will grow out. One plant might grow slightly longer than the other, but it's not going to be imbalanced like people think of. It's just, you know, lots of different plants. It will grow in a balanced sense. So here we are. So I'll talk the plants as I go through them. So I've just told you about how to spot a good plant, how to smell the roots of them. Now how to plant a hanging basket. This is very, very important. First of all, in the top of one of these hanging baskets, I would tend to use a bigger plant. So this is a litre geranium, so it's bigger than the other plants that I have here in terms of pot size, and it just gives me a taller plant. When you come to plant plants, first thing is do not fiddle with the roots. Even if they're going round and round and round, do not prise them open and think you're helping it by prising the roots open. What you're actually doing is destroying the root structure. These roots are a bit like shoots in many respects. Instead of having buds on them, they've got things called nodes. The nodes, in contact with the plastic, can't grow out. But as soon as this root is planted into the compost, it's released from the plastic, and in a very short period of time the nodes will grow out in all directions and the plant will start to grow in the basket. As soon as you try and break it open, because you think you're giving it a hand, all you do is you physically destroy the root structure, and there's less root structure to grow from and to grow away from. So do not do that. So having got the plant in your hand, and you see how I hold it, it's quite important actually how you take it out. Fingers around the plant, squeeze the pot, take it out, it's ready to go. Now, when you're planting the tops of hanging baskets, all containers, or any, even in the garden, but let's talk about baskets and containers today, you must make sure that the hole you are digging, which is what I'm doing here, is the same volume as the plant you're planting, so that whole plant sits in, push down, and leave it. The next big no-no is coming up. You must not squidge the plant. That is doing this. You must not go boom, pum, 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 and thinking you're helping the plant. No, absolute no-no. What you're doing is your finger marks are compressing the compost. And as we remember a couple of minutes ago, I was talking about how the big pores will go to small pores and it will hold water. In the same way, where you squidge it, the water will be held in your finger marks, and when you water it, the water will sit in that compacted area, and what will happen will be this: the sun will come out, the water in that area will start to evaporate a little bit, the microclimate there will be 100% humidity. Along will walk a woodlice, and it will walk across the basket one day, and it will take a little nibble at the geranium or the fuchsia, but it doesn't really like geraniums and fuchsias, so it will pass on by. But what it's done is to create a wound, and with that 100% humidity there, the fungal spores that are all breathing in now and in the environment will alight and land close to that wound. Out will come the mycelium, that's the little root system effectively that the fungal spore has, and the mycelium will find its way into that nick that the woodlice has made, and then the plant will rot off. And that's all because, mostly because, you've created the environment by squidging it for it to be 100% humidity. So no squidging. So having done that, I'm going to take it out again and do it properly. So I'm just going to put the compost back in. There we go. Dig the hole. In goes the plant, sit it there and leave it. Don't flick it around, just leave it. Turn the basket, I'm going to turn it around the side so you can see what I'm doing. This is a plant called a verbena. Hold the plant upside down, squeeze it. There's the nice root system. Put your fingers in, pull the compost across the basket, not out of the basket, but across the basket. Make sure the hole is the same volume as the plant you're planting. Plant the plant into the basket, press down gently and leave it. Move round. Next hole here. Here's a plant called a helichrysum. Nice root system, it's a bit darker. Make sure the plant is going to poke out the hanging basket. A big hole, press down, leave it. Rotate round. See how I'm dragging the compost around the basket? This is a plant called a scavola, a blue scavola, beautiful blue flowers on it. I've dug the big hole, in goes the plant, press down, leave it. You're getting the hang of this. When you come to plant the plants, do not think you're helping the plants by planting them at funny angles. So here's my lobelia here. It's tempting to think I'll make it grow out better if I plant it at an angle to grow out of the hanging basket. That is not the right thing to do. I'll tell you why in a second. Plant it upright to the edge of the basket and leave it like so. Let me come round to the next one, I'll show you why. Let's take a Sophinia petunia. Here it is here. So if you try and plant it at a funny angle like I'm doing there, all you do is encourage a bare patch between the plant and the centre of the hanging basket. It's very difficult for these shoots to go back up, defy gravity and come back to fill that space there. That's why when you come to plant the plants in the basket or in the container, you must plant them upright at the edge of the container like so. One more plant will do. Here's a diacia. I'm going to make a little hole. Again, I'm bringing the compost across, and now across to the verbena that was there. In it goes, upright, press down, leave it. The temptation now is to fiddle, to throw compost in, squidge it, fiddle around with it. Do not fiddle with it. That basket is done. When we come to water this hanging basket, the fines of the compost will work themselves around the roots of the compost. I'll just hold it. You can see it there now how nicely it's planted. And because we water it nicely and the fines will find themselves around the roots, the plants will grow beautifully. There is no compaction in that hanging basket, and that's the key to it. Do not squidge, fiddle around. Do just as I've shown you. So that was a solid hanging basket, a wicker hanging basket. It could have been a container, it could have been a pot, it could have been a plastic hanging basket. It could have been a hanging basket with a liner in it. Exactly the same principle. No side planting, just planting the top. And when we finished, I don't know if you can just about make this out, we want the level of the compost to be, as it is here, about 1/2 inch below the top of the hanging basket, so that we act as a slight reservoir when we come to water it. We don't want a huge reservoir, because the deeper or the less compost there is in the hanging basket, the less capacity there is for water to be held in the basket when we water the basket. It's the compost that's going to hold the water. So we want as much in as we can get, but we don't want to mound it up, otherwise the water will run off. We want to have a little sink there. So that's the first basket. Very easy. So the next hanging basket I want to show you how to plant is one where we side plant the basket. So here is a very common looking wire hanging basket. This is a 14-inch hanging basket. The bigger they are, the easier they are to plant actually. 16-inch baskets easier to plant than 14-inch. Personally, I wouldn't bother with a 12-inch hanging basket. They're too small to keep alive. As the diameter gets bigger, so the volume exponentially gets larger, I suppose, so you've got more chance of keeping it alive, but 12-inch basket's too small. So here it is. Now, I'm going to take the chain off. Jolly stiff. Take the chain off so I've got half a chance to work it. I like flat bottomed wire baskets so they don't wobble around the table, and there it is. There's several ways we can fill this hanging basket. One is we could use a liner. Here is a liner that we could use. The plastic side goes on the inside, the liner sits in the hanging basket, and it acts like a leaf of a plant. You rotate it around like I'm doing, so it sits in there comfortably, and there it is. The liners are never quite big enough for the baskets, ever. And so this is a 14-inch liner in a 14-inch hanging basket, but you can see it's already dropping away from the rim. If that happens, it's very difficult to keep the basket alive because the water just pours out through this hole forever. So if you're going to use a liner, I would encourage you to buy a bigger liner, the bigger size up. So here's a 16-inch liner, which we're going to put into a 14-inch hanging basket. And once we've filled the hanging basket, you can see how it's above the rim of the basket. Once we've filled the basket, we can then trim the liner if we so wish, but at least it's not going to pour out of the side of the hanging basket. I personally never use these. It's because you can't place the plants where you want to. You're restricted by the overlap of the liner, or where somebody's put a hole in it. So I'm not going to plant it for you. If I was using a liner, I would tend to use it as a solid hanging basket and just plant the top rather than trying to plant the sides. So I'm going to take it away. So what we use as a nursery, I'm going to have to bend down to get some, is we use coir. And this is ginger coir that comes from the upholstery industry. Or we sometimes use wool. So this is wool that is actually you can buy for hanging baskets, for lining hanging baskets. You could use other materials. So in the past I've actually used shredded paper from a shredding machine. It works just the same. All you're trying to do is to stop the compost from falling out of the hanging basket as you make the basket. Neither substances really hold water. It's not about holding water, it's about holding the compost within the basket and the plants. That's all it's doing. So I'm going to use coir to start with. I'm not going to use the wool because coir is easier for me. If you do use coir, you want to wet it so that it's not dusty and it's more malleable when it's wet. And I'm going to whiz through this so you can see. So here's my hanging basket. I'm going to plant in this layer here, and I'm going to plant over the top as well. So the first thing I need to do is to put a little bit of coir into the bottom of the basket to stop the compost from falling out of the hanging basket. You want to use as little as possible, not to be mean about it, but because the more coir there is in the basket, the less compost there is. So if I go extreme for you and put this much in, there's very little room for the compost to go in. It's the compost that's going to hold the water when we make this hanging basket. So it's better to have little in there. There it is, just a little bit. You can see it in the bottom. In goes the compost, exactly the same as last time. Throw it in. I don't compact it down, just shake it. So it now looks beautifully tidy. The compost is sitting there. I'm up to the level where I want to plant the first of my plants. I've gone around the nursery and chosen a tray of plants. I'm going to tell you what they are as I plant them, and you're going to see how I do it. These baskets take more plants than you would probably imagine. We're going to use about 16 or 17 plants in here. You can plant it with fewer. If you're going to plant it in fewer, rather than spacing the plants out in the sides and the top, you're just actually better off putting a liner in, filling the top up with compost and putting all your plants in the top of the basket rather than using the few plants sparsely around the whole basket. But we're going to plant it what I call properly. So here we are. So the first plant I got, here's Nepeta, which is a type of catmint. So never use this plant in the top of a hanging basket. It will swamp the basket. It wants to be a plant that's only ever used in the side of a hanging basket. So if I was going back to that original basket I've just planted, that solid basket, you would not find one of these in my baskets because the shoots will come out and eventually swamp the basket and swamp the other plants. So it always wants to be where it can't defy gravity. So here it's going into the side. Same process, take the plant. Now what should I do now? I hold the plant by the foliage. I put the plant alongside the basket, not like that, but alongside the basket. I poke the plant through and then I turn the plant around so that it's sitting square with the basket. Let's do that with the next plant. Here's a Bidens. Grab the plant by the foliage, pull the plant out, hold it by the foliage, look at what I'm doing there, put it square to the basket, put the plant through, rotate the plant round and sit it there. You notice I'm not squidging it, squashing it, or doing anything. I'm just working my way round. Verbena. Take the plant by the foliage, out comes the roots, hold the plant by the foliage, look, here's a long foliage here, square on to the basket, flick it in, pull it round. So here's a lobelia plant. Hold the plant by the foliage, squeeze it, out it comes. The plant goes square to the basket, flick the foliage through, rotate the plant round. What's very difficult to do is to do it like this because it gets caught in the wire. It's much easier the way I'm showing you. So here's a scawola plant. Hold the plant, it's only small, but the same thing applies. Square to the basket, flick it through, pull it round. One more plant. Here's another verbena. Hold it tight, sit square, push it through, flick the plant round, and that's it. So the next bit to do is to put some lining material in there. And so I take the coir, but it could be wool, it could be moss, but I'm using coir here. And this is quite important now. You want to take a coir and one hand is going to rotate one way, one hand's going to rotate the other way, such that I start to make a coil, and I'm slightly pulling it out as I do it. So I've made it so it's got some structure into it. I hold that, I carefully plant it down and push the neck of the plants down like so. So I pick up some more coir. One hand goes one way, the other hand goes the other way. I tease it out slightly as I'm doing it to get the structure into it, and I pull the plant slightly back and I place it in front of the neck of the plant. The reason you shouldn't just take the coir or the wool and slap it against the side here is that there is no structure in it. When you come to water the basket, it will slump, and it'll slump below the wire. Once it does that, the water shoots out. You've got to get structure into the lining material. As I said, you can do this with shredded paper, you can do it with wool, you can do it with moss. But you can see if I turn the basket up now, how the plants are sitting comfortably. They've not been compacted, they're sitting in contact with the compost, and the coir, if I hold it that way, is holding the plant in position. So that's where we got to. In goes a lump of compost. Do not compact it down. There it is. And now I'm going to put the rim on the basket. The rim has to be thicker than the next layer I've just done, because it's got to sit above the wire. So I take the same amount of coir, but I don't stretch it quite so far, and I'm rotating it like so, so that it sits just into the rim of the basket. Can you see that? It could be coir, it could be moss, it could be wool, it could be paper. It doesn't matter. And giving it structure, it sits just there. I'm just tucking it in gently like so. So you can see I'm building up the lining material of the basket. Same again. So this layer is thicker than the layer below because I have to build it up a little bit. You can see it sitting there like so. Last bit to come round. Here we go. It could be moss, paper or wool. And there it is, it sits there. So I've just hold that up for you. You can see, I'm going to put more compost in a minute, how I've built the rim up on this hanging basket. So we've got a layer of plants sitting comfortably in the basket, and we've got the coir being built up. We try to keep the coir, you've got to have it thick enough to work, but you don't want it invading the basket. You want to, again, use as little as possible, but get to the structure that you need to get to. So that's where we got to. So now, we're going to put more compost in. Now this is a really important part of the hanging basket. If I was just to fill the compost like that and thought that was good enough, when I come to water this hanging basket, the compost is going to sink into the basket and I'd lose quite a significant volume of compost. We have to get as much compost into this basket as we can, because as I said before, it's the compost that holds the water when we water the hanging basket. So watch what happens. You might think I'm being a bit silly here. If I pile the compost up here, as I have done now, looks like I got far too much, and I use my fingertips, not the flat of my hand, but my fingertips, you'll see that all this compost works its way into and around the plants below. There, look at that. I've got a flat table now, but the compost has gone into the basket. If I hadn't have done that, I'd have lost that volume of compost, and it's that volume that makes this hanging basket hold water. We've got a flat table, it's slightly raised above the rim, which is really important, and now it's just like planting the last basket we did with a solid hanging basket. So let me find a geranium. So here's a geranium, if you remember, out comes the plant. I hold it like so. I now take the compost out that I don't want, because I'm digging the same volume out, so that when I put my geranium in, it sits there, press down gently and leave it. I'm going to start from here so you can see. Here's a little million bells petunia. Same process as the other one. Hole, I'm dragging the compost now around the basket. Hole, plant sits in there, press down gently, leave it. Here's a Lysimachia plant, which has lovely yellow flowers on it. Again, hole, so you can see, press down, leave it. And again, as we said last time, make sure the plants are planted upright, not at silly angles. Here's a hole, plant for the petunia, upright, press down, leave it. One of the big mistakes that people make is not to dig these holes deep enough. So let me just show you a mistake. You do a little scrape, put the plant in and leave it like so. That's not how it should be. The plant has got to be dug well into the basket. It's very easy this. Press down, you can see there. And because I'm not squidging it, these plants look like they've been, this is a type of Bidens, but not a big trailing one. It looks like the plants have been grown together for some time. I can plant a hanging basket from scratch that looks like it's been there for a month by planting it correctly. The plants aren't discrete, they're already beginning to merge into each other by having the right technique. Here's a Diacia plant. Another hole, upright, press down, leave it. And we'll finish with a Plectranthus plant. I love this plant. It's just a foliage plant and it arches and beautifully arching. Again, nice hole, press down, leave it. The temptation is to fiddle with it. Do not fiddle with it, leave it alone. And if we were to look carefully, it's beautifully upright. There's no mounding on the compost. The plants have sat in there easily. I'm going to put the chain back on so we can see. We've got our 2 layers of plants. Let me find the clip. If I hold it up, you can see there how we've got 1 layer of plants there and the layer of plants over the top. These will come over the top and merge with those. Those are going to go down, and some of this is going to grow to, I suppose 6 foot eventually, about that sort of depth. If I turn it up a little bit towards you can see it's planted very naturally, isn't it? The plants are already looking like they're merging together. They're not discrete and squidged. It's all beautifully done. So that is a wire basket using loose material. I've used coir. It could be wool. It could be shredded paper. So far we've made 2 hanging baskets, both of which are solid compost. I want to spend a few minutes talking about how to make watering a little bit easier. So here I have another hanging basket. It's a 16-inch hanging basket. It's got a coir lining, so that holds water, which is helpful. And the simplest way to aid watering in this basket, the simplest way is to use a series of PET bottles. If you were to put some holes in the bottom of the bottle here, which I've done, only in the bottom, not the top, in the bottom, plant the bottles to the side of the basket. You could put 3 in this one. When you come to water the hanging basket, having made it like we've made the previous ones, you water the top of the basket, but you also put water down the PET bottle. And what the PET bottle does is allow the water to get into the bottom of the hanging basket. It goes directly through the bottle to the bottom, so we know we get the bottom of the basket hydrated. Why is that important? Because if we can get the bottom of the basket hydrated, the capillary action of the compost will move the water upwards. So we've always got to try and get water into the bottom of the basket. Simplest way, 3 of these planted into the side of the basket. That's one way. Now, for those of you who know the nursery, you'll know that for years I have been making reservoir hanging baskets with a homemade reservoir. And for those of you who bought a basket from me this year or last year, you'll have these bits in your baskets at the moment. You must be very careful when you turn your basket out at the end of the season to retain the capillary mat and the capillary wicks that are in your basket, because you need these to make the reservoirs work. So how does the reservoir work? Well, here's a very simple reservoir. I've taken this happens to be a butter container, but it could be an ice cream container. This one holds 2.5 litres. I've cut a hole into the lid to allow me to access into the bottom of the container. I've got a pipe here from the building in trade, I suppose, that sits into the container. This is going to sit in the bottom of the basket, and you're going to see the pipe hanging out of the hanging basket. The water can only come out of this container if you use the wicks. This capillary matting is very technical. Its life is to lift water, and so it will lift the water from the bottom of this container to about 15 centimetres, which this is not deeper than that. So the wicks go into the bottom of the container and overhang the top. Here's two. I always like to use two. One will probably work, but two's enough. They sit like so. The pipe goes into the container like so. So the water's going to go down the pipe into the container. The wicks are going to lift the water, and the mat is going to sit in contact with the wicks. And then the mat's going to spread the water across the base of the basket for me. So let's put that together. Here's the container sitting in the bottom of the hanging basket. Here's the wicks in the container, which hopefully you have retained. Here is the pipe, it's going to sit there. And in a minute, I'm going to put the mat on top. That's how we do it. So this is how we're going to make the basket. So I'm going to take the container, I place it into the bottom of the basket. There's no wicks in yet. I take my compost, I put it around the container, and I'll show you in a second, without it falling into the container. So I'll hold it up and you'll see. So there it is. There's the container sitting in the bottom of the basket with the compost around it. We need the compost because it will also hold some water as well. So now I'm going to put the wicks in. Here's one wick, in it goes. Here's the second wick, in it goes. In goes the pipe. There it goes. On goes the mat in contact with the wicks. There it goes. And now I'm going to fill it up with compost. So just like last time, in it goes. So in the bottom of that hanging basket now is a 2.5 litre container. Why is that important? It's important because if we were to fill this basket up with compost and we were to water it and then to wring the water out of the compost, no way will there be 2.5 litres of water in it. It allows us to put a lot more water into this hanging basket. So it's just now like planting the top of a hanging basket. Don't want too much compost in there, I slightly overdid it there. And I'm going to start by putting, it's quite a big basket this, so I'm going to use 2 geraniums in the centre. If you remember, we've done this already. You can just about hear it. I'm on the top of the lid of the container. It'll sit there, but I'm not squashing it down, as you can see. And I whiz on here because we've done this a little bit before. There it goes. Sit it in. That's it. And then I'm going to take my plants and just work myself around. So here's a gazania plant. I'm going to do this quite quickly. Hole, remember last time? Deep hole, plant down, push down. Lobelia plant. Oh, take the label out. Hole. Upright, push down gently. Here's a Biden's plant. Hole, upright, push down. Here's a verbena plant. You can use fewer plants, but you're going to have to wait longer for them to join up. This is the density that we would plant our baskets, or have been planting our baskets. Here's my Plectranthus plant. There we go. Here's another verbena. If you remember what I said to you earlier, I wouldn't use that in the top of one of these hanging baskets. So here is a Bacopa plant. And here it is. That's going to sit there. Push down. There it is. No fiddling. If it's slightly mounded, it doesn't matter because we're never going to water the top of this hanging basket. We're just going to water it once when we water it in just to get the compost settled around the roots of the plants. Other than that, its whole life is going to be watered down this black tube. It's going to go into the reservoir. The wicks are going to lift it, the mat's going to spread it. These plants are sitting close to the mat and they're going to get all their nutrient and water from that area there. There's a slight paradox about these baskets because the baskets grow so well, because effectively the plants are sitting on nutrient and water on that mat. I'm going to come to the nutrition in a minute. They grow so well. The paradox is that you get a bigger leaf area because they grow that much bigger, and therefore they transpire more, which basically means they use more water, and so you have to water them regularly because they get so big. This basket will eventually be 6 foot down, easily 6 foot down by doing that. So you can see the basket there planted, and that's how we water it from now on, down that pipe. These baskets need a lot of feeding. You cannot put all the feed in the compost at once. We do in our compost have some slow release feed, but you can't put enough for the season. It'd be toxic at the rate to do that. So you have to rely on liquid feeding. And in this basket, I'd recommend with all the baskets that you use a tomato feed, because the tomato feed has the right balance of nutrients to make plants flower, and it's the flower that we want. We're not looking for lots of vegetative growth, we're looking for a lot of flower. So tomato feed, lots of liquid feeding tomato feed. This is the last basket I'm going to make. This is a very familiar basket to many of you who've been to the nursery because it's what's called a plant pack county basket. That's the name of the basket, but it's a basket we've favoured for our reservoirs over many years. And the reason I quite like it is because it has a thick rim to it, so it saves us having to make a coir rim. But we've got to use a lining material or coir in this hanging basket. It could be a wire basket, but I've chosen to use this one. But the same principle will apply for a wire basket. So again, it's going to be a reservoir hanging basket because many of you have got these at home, and you'll hopefully have the bits saved from when you turf the basket out in the autumn. So again, here's my reservoir. I'm going to take my reservoir, I'm not going to go through it again, I'm going to place it in the bottom of the hanging basket. If it was a wire hanging basket, you would see the bottom of the reservoir because the wire is not solid like here. If that is so, then take some coir, put it in the bottom of the wire basket and place the reservoir on top of the coir so you can't see the base of the reservoir. But in this instance, I have a base already, so I don't need to worry. So I'm going to take my reservoir, I put it in, I hold it, I now need to hide it so we can't see the sides. I hold it, I take my loose material, it could be wool, could be coir, could even be shredded paper, and I just place it down. I'm not trying to make any structure to it, I'm just trying to hide the reservoir from view, and I'll show you in a second. So here it is, nothing very technical about this. Again, if you had your basket from me last year, the coir will also be in the basket, so save it because you can reuse it. Put it in a bag, put it away in the shed and keep it. So now if I hold it up, I know you can see a bit of it, but principally you can't see too much of the reservoir. There it is. So it's hidden effectively in the bottom. In goes the wicks as last time. There's one wick there. Here goes the second wick. That goes in there. In goes the tubes. Probably a bit long, this one, but sticking out too far. But anyway, at least it's illustrative and you can see where it is. I might make it a bit shorter if I was doing it for you, but I'm not. I'm just doing it for the camera. There it is. On. So there we have it there. On goes the mat on top of the wicks. So now it looks like so. We've hidden the reservoir completely. In goes the compost. So again, handful of compost, throw it in, shake it around. Do not pat it down. And now I'm able to plant the first layer of plants on this basket. I've got some plants from earlier. So here they are. So the same as I showed you on the wire basket earlier, hold the plant by the foliage, gather it together, put the plant square to the basket, push the foliage through, as I'm doing there, rotate the plant round so it sits comfortably like so. Here's a verbena. You think, gosh, how's that going to fit through that small gap? But it is. Grasp the verbena together, push it through like I'm doing now. Might break the flower off, but it doesn't matter. Rotate it round and sit it down. Now, that verbena can sit like so, or it could sit like that upside down. It wants to sit the right way round. Here's a petunia plant. Again, hold it. I'm putting my hand through and grabbing it and taking it through and rotating the plant round. There it is. Remember, there's no squishing, there's no squashing, there's no wrecking the roots. It all wants to be very gentle and loosey-goosey, if that's the right word. Here's a Biden's plant. I'm holding the plant together, poking it through, rotating it round. It could be a wire basket. It's the same technique for a wire basket, but this just happens to be this county plant pot basket that many of you have. Here's a scavola plant. You can hear crinkle, crinkle, crinkle. Round it goes, round it goes. Here's a gazania. I'm very fond of gazinias. They're a great plant for hanging baskets. Crunch it together, poke it round, round it goes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I usually put 7 in actually, so let's put one more in. Here is a little small flowered petunia. Again, I'm just going to put it through. There it is. So there you can see the plants sitting in the hanging basket on top of the reservoir, on top of the mat. There it is. This basket has a rim on it, so I don't have to concern myself with a rim. If it's a wire basket, we would need to go through the process of taking a lining material, rotate, 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 and putting a rim on. But we don't with this one. All we need to do is to stop the compost from falling out that hole. So I just need to take a little bit of coir, frankly, and just stick it in these holes like I'm doing here. Nothing technical about this, just so that the compost doesn't fall out to the hole when I come to throw it in. So there it is. You can see it now. It's just blocked it off nicely. That's why it's quite a good basket, really. And now I fill the top up like I've done before. So in goes the compost. Again, no pushing it down. I'm going to do exactly the same as last time, just use my fingertips to work it down. like I did last time, where we made a basket that had side planting in it. And because this is a reservoir hanging basket and the water is always going to come from the bottom up, I can afford to have it slightly mounded, because we're never going to water the top of the basket except for when we water it in initially. That's it. So the fact that it's slightly mounded, you think, gosh, the water's going to run off. It doesn't matter, because the water's going to come from the bottom up. Again, I take a geranium, one we'll do in this instance, in the same way, dig a big hole. We've got depth of compost now because we put quite a lot in there. So I take the compost out. I can fill them out. I can fill them out now. Here's my geranium. In it goes. It just sits there comfortably. And then I work my way around now. I'm going to start from this spout. Same technique as we've done before for any of the baskets. Dig the compost across the basket, not out, but across the basket. Take your plant, plant it vertically. Push it down slightly. Here's a copra plant. Exactly the same again. Vertically. Here's a lobelia plant. Exactly the same again. Some of you are saying, where's the fuchsias, Rog? Well, truthfully, I'm not very keen on fuchsias. That's why there aren't any here. So that's why. Here's a verbena plant. Press it down gently. Here's this won't be very well rooted because it takes such a long time, but here's a trailing, effectively. As you can see, it's hardly got any root at all. You've got to be careful with it. A trailing begonia plant. Again, look, the fact it hasn't got much root on doesn't mean I've destroyed it. Look how carefully I've held it together. In it goes. Press down gently. Upright. Notice it's upright. Don't do funny things with it. Here's a diacia plant. Again, nice hole. Look how easy it is to plant. I'm not forcing it. It's all going in gently. Press down. There it goes. We can put one more plant in. Here's a trailing geranium. These, when I'm planting them, rather than poking them out, I tend to plant them across a little bit, and then they find their way across and out. So again, upright. Don't plant it at a funny angle. Press it down. And there it is. And there you can see we have just made a Reservoir 14-inch county plant pack hanging basket, which many of you have got at home already. The chain's always a pain, but let's try and find a chain. I have to put my glasses on probably. There's the tab, glasses on. Find the hole, there it is there. Hold the tab carefully, put it in, rotate, and it's in. So it's like taking off. If I hold it up, don't fiddle. Remember, no fiddling, no squidging, no going over it, pressing it down or anything, just leave it. When we water it in, the fines will find themselves around the roots of the plants. There's no compaction going on there, and the plants will grow beautifully. So if I hold it up, you can see the first layer of plants we planted above the reservoir, and then you can see how we planted the second layer of plants on top. And both will match, and that'll be a fantastic hanging basket. Again, the water goes down the pipe and a lot of liquid feeding with tomato food. So that is the 4 hanging baskets I wanted to show you. That pretty much shows you how to plant all the hanging baskets you'll ever see. There was a solid wicker hanging basket, a reservoir basket, could be wire, or in this case it's semi-plastic but with side planting as well. Then there's this solid compost wire hanging basket that we planted. And then there was the Reservoir solid basket that we planted. It could be a wicker basket. I just happened to choose one that has a coir lining, but it could have been this sort of basket, couldn't it? Or even a plastic basket, but we put a reservoir in. That's the 4 hanging baskets. So just to summarise, the absolute no-nos are, for really good hanging basket making, do not compact the compost. You must keep it light and loosey. Do not squidge the plants when you plant them. It's an absolute no-no. Do not try and help the root system by breaking it up, because all you do is destroy the structure of the root. Keep it light and fluffy all the time. Use enough plants to cover it really when you start. If you use fewer plants, you just got to wait longer for them to connect up, that's all. And don't forget, you must use a lot of tomato feed when you get into the season. Deadheading, you don't need to deadhead any of these plants. So let me tell you why. When we were younger, a lot younger, possibly, you know, grandparents and all that sort of stuff, or even parents, all these plants used to set seed. So a bee would come along, pollinate the plant would set seed, the plant would photosynthesize, and all the nutrients that the plant produced would actually go into the seed production, and the plants would stop flowering or reduce their flowering because all the nutrients had gone to seed production. So that's why we used to take the seed heads off to stop the plant from putting all the nutrients into seed production. But all these plants, without exception in this basket, have been bred sterile. They don't produce a seed between them, and that's why they perpetually flower. So they have been tricked into flowering, and none of the nutrient and the photosynthase that they make goes into seed production because there are no seeds. That's why you don't need to deadhead them. And in my experience, those people who are avid deadheaders tend to take too much off and do too much damage. Far better to leave it. What will happen to that petunia flower, even if it rains like crazy, will eventually, when the flower comes to the end of its life, it will have size. That means it will break away from the plant, and eventually you'll get some dry weather. It will blow away eventually and disappear. Occasionally, geraniums look a bit unsightly, but of all the plants in this hanging basket, if I was to deadhead anything, which I wouldn't, it would be the geranium flower when it gets slightly unsightly. But you don't need the deadhead. I think I've just about covered it. To all of you who've been to the nursery, can I say thank you very much for your support over the last 35 years. It has been a real gas. We've enjoyed it. I've probably made close on 500,000 hanging baskets over that time. It's getting on for that. We've won hundreds of awards, or our customers have over the years. It's been a right gas. And I say to you, happy basket making, and thank you very much.